Husband discards, his poor pregnant wife, unaware. She's a billionaire, now she returns for payback. Ava Donovan never imagined her fairy tale marriage could turn into a nightmare. She was pregnant, vulnerable, and desperate for the love she thought would last forever. But on a stormy night, her husband Daniel threw her out onto the cold streets, shattering her illusions in a single cruel moment. Little did he know, the timid, penniless woman he scorned was actually the sole heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire. With her heart scarred and her baby on the way, Ava vowed to rise from the ashes. And when she finally returned, she was determined to deliver a reckoning no one would forget. Ava Donovan came from humble beginnings, or so the world believed. She lived in a modest Chicago apartment, worked at a small bookstore, and studied part-time at the local community college. Her gentle demeanor and unassuming manner made it easy to underestimate her. Even Daniel Donovan, her husband, never truly suspected her real background, let alone the unimaginable wealth she had inherited from her late mother's side of the family, the powerful Mackenzie clan, which had holdings worldwide. Ava's life might have looked simple, but behind the scenes her father, William Mackenzie, had always been a looming presence. He was a renowned billionaire investor with stakes in real estate, tech startups, and major corporations. However, William had been estranged from Ava and her mother ever since Ava was a child, mainly because of his relentless pursuit of power, which caused friction in the family. Ava's mother, Margaret Mackenzie, had insisted on raising Ava away from the snobbery of high society. The two women lived quietly, without bodyguards or extravagant parties, forging a peaceful life in Chicago while William continued to expand his empire across the globe. Margaret's passing 3 years ago left Ava heartbroken and adrift. She inherited a vast estate, though hardly anyone in her day-to-day circle knew it. Out of respect for her mother's desire for a normal existence, Ava concealed her fortune. She stepped carefully, not drawing attention to her birthright, and never flaunted the wealth that was hers. All she wanted was to live an ordinary life. For a while she thought she had succeeded in doing so, until she met Daniel. Daniel worked in corporate sales at a local car dealership. His charisma was undeniable. Tall, with a confident swagger and a charming smile, he had a way of captivating everyone around him. When Ava walked into the dealership to buy a used car, one she could easily have paid for in cash, though she chose to keep her finances discreet, Daniel was instantly taken by her beauty. The two started dating, and within 6 months they had a whirlwind romance culminating in a quick wedding at City Hall. For a time, Ava was the happiest she'd ever been. She believed Daniel loved her for who she was, not for what she owned or what she could potentially offer. She enjoyed his jokes, admired his ambition, and felt safe in his presence. When Ava found out she was pregnant, Daniel seemed overjoyed, promising that he would step up as a provider and father. He didn't have a huge salary, but he was determined to climb the corporate ladder, often talking about making it big. Ava appreciated his drive and never once considered pulling back the curtain on her own hidden resources. It was only after the marriage that cracks began to appear in their domestic bliss. Daniel started making snide remarks about Ava not earning enough. He insisted she pick up extra shifts at the bookstore, complaining incessantly about the cost of rent and the baby expenses on the horizon. He spent money liberally on himself: nice suits, fancy dinners with colleagues, and expensive weekends away under the guise of client relations. Yet he constantly nagged Ava about every small purchase she made, from prenatal vitamins to an occasional treat at the local cafe. The tension in their one-bedroom apartment became palpable. Ava's pregnancy progressed, and she tried to keep the peace at home. She promised to do everything in her power to support Daniel's career aspirations, all while quietly dealing with morning sickness, fatigue, and her own mounting fears about the future. She kept telling herself that once the baby arrived, Daniel would come around, love would prevail. She wanted to believe the best in him, even though she knew deep down that Daniel was changing in ways she could barely recognize. The final straw came one stormy night during Ava's 6th month of pregnancy. Rain pelted the windows, lightning cracked across the sky, and thunder vibrated through their small living room. Daniel had come home late after a business dinner, reeking of alcohol and perfume. Ava's heart sank at the realization that another woman's scent clung to him. His tie was askew, and his usually carefully styled hair was disheveled. "What happened to you?" Ava asked, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. She tried to approach him gently, offering to help him off with his soaked jacket. "Don't touch me," he snapped, yanking his arm away. "You think you're so special because you're pregnant, like I owe you everything?" "Daniel, I don't understand," she said, tears stinging her eyes. "You were supposed to be out with a client. You smell like—" "Don't start, Ava," he slurred, jabbing a finger at her. "I'm not in the mood for your nagging. Do you know how humiliating it is for me to be married to a woman who can barely hold down a decent job? Don't you realize how that looks in front of my co-workers?" She took a trembling breath. "Daniel, we're partners. I'm doing my best. We're having a baby, remember? I'm trying to save money, support you." "Save money?" He barked out a harsh laugh, staggering dangerously close to her. "What money? And now we have a baby on the way. Great. Just an extra mouth to feed." Ava had never seen him quite like this, raw, angry, and downright cruel. "Daniel," she whispered, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "What are you saying? You wanted this baby. You told me you were excited." He scoffed. "Yeah, well, maybe I changed my mind. What have you done for me lately, Ava? I'm going nowhere because I'm stuck in this tiny apartment with you, paying your bills. You've never brought anything to the table." "That's not fair," she said, mustering courage she didn't know she had. "I've never asked you for a lavish lifestyle. I've paid my share of rent and bills. Suddenly, Daniel grabbed her suitcase from the corner, yanked open their closet, and began stuffing her clothes into it. Ava watched in horror and confusion. "Daniel, what are you doing?" "I'm done. Get out of my life. I can't stand looking at your face anymore. Please, calm down," she begged. "I'm pregnant. We should talk." "Talk." He zipped the suitcase, threw it to the floor with a loud thud, and gestured to the door. "Get your stuff and leave. I have enough to deal with. I don't need a whining pregnant wife on top of it." Ava's world spun. It felt like she was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. She tried one last time to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he shoved her roughly toward the front door, ignoring her obvious distress. In a desperate attempt to protect herself and her unborn child, Ava wrapped her arms around her belly, stumbling out of the apartment into the pounding rain. He flung her suitcase out after her. Instead, he shoved her roughly toward the front door, ignoring her obvious distress. In a desperate attempt to protect herself and her unborn child, Ava wrapped her arms around her. The door slammed shut with a rage that matched the raging storm outside. Soaked to the skin, tears merging with raindrops, Ava stood on the stoop in the middle of the night. She felt betrayed, abandoned, and terrified. She had nowhere to go, nowhere except back to the life she had turned her back on for the sake of normalcy. As thunder rumbled ominously overhead, Ava clutched her suitcase in one hand, her other hand protectively over her belly. Anger and heartbreak warred within her, but a new resolve took root. She had tried to be the quiet, supportive wife, the normal, unassuming woman. Daniel had thrown all of that back in her face. If only he knew who she really was. If only he knew the power she could wield with a single phone call. But for now, Ava just needed to survive this night. She turned away from the apartment that once held her hopes and dreams, and she walked into the storm. Daniel would regret what he'd done. That much she was sure of, and when the time came for him to face the consequences, Ava would stand tall, holding the ace he never suspected she possessed. After Daniel threw her out, Ava found temporary refuge in a small motel on the outskirts of Chicago. She paid for her room in cash, grateful she carried a little emergency fund. Though her pregnancy was beginning to show, Ava's face still bore a youthfulness that might have caused others to doubt she was about to enter motherhood. In the lonely stillness of the motel room, the reality of her situation sunk in. She was alone, pregnant, and devastated. But she wasn't destitute. Early the next morning, she dialed a private number, one she rarely used. At first, the call went to voicemail. Then, moments later, her phone buzzed with a return call. A distinguished, slightly frail voice answered. "Ava, my dear, is that you?" The voice belonged to Gerald Parker, an older man who had served as her mother's attorney and confidant for decades. He was one of the few people who knew of Ava's true heritage. "Mr. Parker," she said softly, her voice breaking, "I need your help." He arrived at her motel within the hour, his silver hair gleaming in the morning sun. Wearing a crisp navy suit despite the early hour, he gave Ava a somber once-over. Concern etched lines into his aging face. "My dear," he said, "I heard rumors that you married quietly. I hoped you found happiness. Now I see that's not the case." Ava shook her head, tears threatening to spill again. "He threw me out, Mr. Parker. He doesn't even know who I truly am. I never told him about my family or the inheritance." Gerald listened carefully. He had known Ava since her childhood and had respected Margaret's wishes to keep Ava's inheritance a secret until she was ready to handle it. "I'm sorry," he said, voice quivering with empathy. "What do you want to do now?" Ava thought about it long and hard. She was tired, her eyes puffy from crying, but she had to consider her baby. "I need a place to stay," she said. I think I'm finally ready to step into the world my mother left behind. No more hiding." Gerald nodded solemnly. "It's your birthright," he said. "Your mother wanted you to have the freedom to choose. She never wanted your life overshadowed by money, nor did she want it consumed by family drama. But you've had to face the harshness of life on your own now. Perhaps it's time to gather your resources." Ava swallowed hard, remembering all the time she had yearned for a normal life rather than the extravagance her father embodied. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." Within hours, Gerald had whisked Ava to a discreet penthouse in downtown Chicago, a property that had once belonged to her mother but had remained unoccupied for years. Situated in a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan, it was complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and understated modern decor. The penthouse was lavish, far beyond what Ava had grown used to in her modest apartment with Daniel. She felt overwhelmed by its size and opulence. "It's too much," she whispered as she stepped into the spacious living room, her eyes scanning the massive windows that displayed Chicago's skyline in all its glory. Gerald approached her gently. "Ava, you own this place. You can make it as comfortable or as simple as you like, but you deserve a safe home, especially now that you're expecting." Ava's hand went to her belly. Tears threatened again, not of sorrow, but of sheer relief. She had a place now, a safe haven for herself and her unborn child. "Thank you, Mr. Parker," she murmured. He handed her a set of keys. "I've already made sure the refrigerator is stocked. I'll arrange for a housekeeper if you'd like. And remember, the Mackenzie estate is vast. There are funds we can activate for you whenever you wish." Ava nodded, remembering how her mother had always told her, "Money can solve practical problems, but never matters of the heart." Right now her heart was battered, but her immediate concerns, shelter, food, basic security, were met. She was safe, and that was enough for the moment. Over the following days, Ava tried to settle into her new environment. She furnished a small room as a nursery, carefully choosing neutral colors since she didn't know if she was having a boy or a girl. She felt strange walking through stores like Pottery Barn Kids and high-end baby boutiques, knowing she could afford anything, yet still feeling that quiet humility her mother had instilled in her. On more than one occasion, she nearly broke down in tears in the baby aisle, overwhelmed by the choices and the memory of Daniel's betrayal. One morning, Ava received an unexpected visitor. She opened the door to find Linda Summers, a journalist from Chicago Finance Daily, accompanied by a photographer. Linda was a former acquaintance of her father, William Mackenzie, and somehow had caught wind that Ava was back in the Mackenzie fold. "Miss Donovan," Linda said, standing at the threshold in a smart blazer, notepad in hand, "or should I call you Miss Mackenzie? I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, but we've been trying to reach you about your father's latest acquisition. Any comment on the rumors that you might be taking an active role in the Mackenzie business empire?" Ava's stomach churned. She had no intention of speaking publicly. "I'm sorry," she said, keeping her composure. "I'm not giving interviews." As politely as she could, Ava closed the door on Linda, ignoring the flurry of questions that came next. Her father's acquisitions were none of her concern, or at least that's what she had believed for years, but the news of him still caused a knot of anxiety in her chest. Part of her dreaded the idea of crossing paths with him again. Another part of her knew that if she truly wanted to navigate this new reality, she might have to. That evening, Ava confronted the question head-on with Gerald. "What about my father?" she asked as they sat together in the penthouse's plush living room. She sipped a cup of decaffeinated tea, mindful of her pregnancy. "Does he know I'm here?" Gerald sighed. "I've kept him informed of your well-being, with your mother's permission, ever since she passed. He's aware you've taken up residence in your penthouse. Whether he chooses to contact you or not, I cannot say." Ava closed her eyes, remembering the man she once called Dad. He had visited sporadically during her childhood, lavishing her with expensive gifts on birthdays, only to vanish soon after. She had never felt he truly cared for her beyond the superficial gestures. Eventually, Margaret made a point of cutting ties, determined to raise Ava without his influence. Now, fate might force them to cross paths again. Over the next few weeks, Ava began receiving phone calls from unknown numbers, many of which she ignored. She started receiving letters and invitations to Mackenzie family gatherings she had never known existed. The Chicago social scene was abuzz with rumors that the long-estranged daughter of William Mackenzie was re-emerging, pregnant, and possibly poised to become a major player in the Mackenzie legacy. Ava, meanwhile, had no interest in the glitz and glamour. Her focus was on her baby's health and getting herself emotionally stable. Still, she couldn't ignore the persistent internal flicker of anger and sadness whenever she thought of Daniel. He had tossed her aside, calling her worthless. He had no idea what she'd sacrificed to be with him, how she had hidden her wealth so he wouldn't feel overshadowed. And now, here she was, living in a penthouse with more resources than he could ever dream of, if only he knew. She tried to keep her mind busy by reading parenting books, carefully doing prenatal exercises, and confiding in Gerald about her plans. During one such conversation, Gerald cleared his throat delicately. "Ava," he said, "there's one more thing we need to address, your mother's will. Now that you're residing in one of her properties, it seems appropriate to discuss the next steps formally." Ava nodded, her heart fluttering with unease. "Yes, of course. Before your mother passed," he explained, "she set up a trust to be activated upon the birth of your first child. The baby will inherit a substantial portion of the Mackenzie assets, enough to last for generations, but she also included a clause that you should be the child's guardian and trustee until they come of age. Your father can't contest it without risking significant legal repercussions." Ava felt her chest tighten. She had never realized the extent of her mother's planning. "So, this is all locked in?" Gerald gave her a sympathetic smile. "Yes. No one can take it from you or from your child. You are both protected." Protected. The word resonated in Ava's mind like a promise. She had power now, a safety net for her child. Gone was the desperate woman who had begged Daniel not to leave. In her place was a mother determined to protect her baby and herself. She vowed that Daniel would never again make her feel small. She wasn't the poor, helpless wife he assumed she was. As the weeks turned into months, Ava settled more firmly into her new life, preparing for the birth of her child. Occasionally she wondered what Daniel was doing now. Perhaps he was still living in the same old apartment, driving the same old car, complaining about how she was a burden. Maybe he had moved on to someone else, someone he perceived as more glamorous or wealthier. The irony was painful. Little did he know that the woman he discarded was worth more than he could fathom. Little did he know that his unborn child would inherit a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. Most nights, Ava pushed away the desire for revenge. She had her baby to consider. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that money couldn't buy true happiness. But every so often, in the quiet dark, she would think, one day he will beg for forgiveness, and I might not be so quick to give it. As Ava's 7th month of pregnancy approached, she began experiencing the usual discomforts: swollen ankles, back pains, sleepless nights. Yet, in the midst of physical aches, her mind whirled with new plans and possibilities. She had started making discreet inquiries about philanthropic ventures, remembering her mother's advice to use wealth for good causes. One such idea was to open a specialized library or resource center for young mothers, combining her love of books with her empathy for women struggling with pregnancy and parenthood. Gerald was supportive, though he reminded her not to overexert herself. "You have time," he told her. "Focus on your health first. The rest will fall into place." One crisp morning, Ava woke to the intercom buzzing. It was the building's front desk, announcing that a visitor had arrived unexpectedly. Her heart pounded. Could it be Daniel, or worse, her father? She shuffled to the monitor and pressed the button. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. "It's Emily Clark, Miss Donovan," the doorman said politely. "She claims to be an old friend?" Ava's face lit up. Emily Clark was indeed an old friend, one of the very few who knew bits and pieces of her complicated family story. Emily had attended a few high school summers with Ava when they volunteered at a local reading program. She also knew Ava's secret identity, but never betrayed her trust. "Send her up, please." Moments later, Emily stepped into the penthouse wide-eyed. "Wow, Ava," she breathed, taking in the luxurious surroundings. "You weren't kidding when you said you had some family money." Ava laughed, waddling over to give her a gentle hug. "Trust me, if it weren't for my predicament, I might still be living in that tiny apartment." She ushered Emily into the living room, and the two sat down. Emily set a small bag of pastries on the coffee table. "Figured you might be craving something sweet," she teased. "How are you feeling?" Ava poured them both cups of tea. "Better," she admitted, resting her hands on her growing belly. "Settled, at least. But definitely not over Daniel." Emily's face clouded. She had been furious when she heard how Daniel had treated Ava. "Have you heard from him at all?" she asked softly. "Not a word," Ava replied, trying to hide the flicker of pain that came with the admission. In truth, part of her wanted Daniel to call her, to beg her forgiveness. Another part of her feared it would reopen old wounds. Emily placed a comforting hand on Ava's arm. "You deserve better. And by the way, if you need help with anything, the baby, errands, even just moral support, I'm here." Touched, Ava smiled through teary eyes. "Thank you. Actually, there is something you could help me with. I'm thinking of starting a small foundation or resource center for young mothers who need guidance, prenatal care, counseling, job support. I'd love your input." Emily's eyes lit up. "That's a fantastic idea. Absolutely, I'll help. Let's draft a plan soon." After Emily left, Ava felt buoyed by their conversation. For the first time in weeks, she looked forward to something beyond the bleak memory of her failed marriage. She was already scheduled for a prenatal appointment the following week, so she decided to make it a day to explore possible locations for her center as well. But the next day brought an even more startling development: a knock on her penthouse door, followed by the unmistakable face of William Mackenzie, her father. Ava froze, heart in her throat. She hadn't seen him in years, And there he stood, a tall man with a rigid posture, silver-streaked hair, and the confident gaze of someone who commanded boardrooms. He wore a tailored suit that must have cost thousands, and a gold watch that gleamed under the foyer light. "Hello, Ava," he said, voice measured. "May I come in?" She hesitated, but ultimately stepped aside. "Of course." William entered, surveying the penthouse with an appraising eye. "I see you've made yourself at home," he observed. Ava nodded, crossing her arms over her chest. "Mr. Parker helped me settle in." "Gerald is a good man," William said, standing by the window. His eyes flicked to her belly, and for the first time a softening touched his otherwise stern features. "You're carrying my grandchild." Ava's hand instinctively went to her stomach. She felt a mixture of protectiveness and uncertainty. "Yes, I am." William's shoulders sagged just a fraction. He took a deep breath. "Ava, I know I've never been the ideal father. Your mother and I had differences, but I want you to know that whatever you need, I'm here to provide it." She stared at him, emotions swirling. "And what exactly do you think I need from you, Father?" He cleared his throat. "Financial support, for starters. Connections, protection from prying media. I realize you might resent me, but I don't want you to go through this alone." Ava's initial instinct was to snap that she didn't need his help, that she was perfectly capable, especially with her inheritance. But she paused, recalling what Gerald had said about how her mother had wanted them to reconcile one day. And if she was honest, being under the Mackenzie umbrella could shield her child from any harm Daniel might bring if he resurfaced, especially if he tried to assert any paternal rights he hadn't earned. "I appreciate the offer," she finally said. "But let's be clear, I'm not looking to be your puppet. If you want to be part of this child's life, it has to be on our terms, mine and the baby's." William nodded slowly. "I understand." A hint of relief crossed his face. "I'll do my best to respect that." They talked for another hour, mostly about practical matters. Her health, the baby's due date, possible gossip in the press. William offered to help secure the best doctors and to provide additional security if needed. Ava, though wary, recognized the potential benefits of aligning with her father, at least for her child's sake. Over the next couple of weeks, William visited a few more times. He even accompanied Ava to a high-end maternity boutique, paying for an assortment of items despite her protests. It felt surreal, walking alongside a man she had feared and avoided for so long, bonding over unborn baby clothes. Part of her softened toward him when she saw the genuine pride he took in the idea of becoming a grandfather. Still, she kept her emotional guard up. She couldn't forget the absentee father who never showed up for birthdays and rarely called, but she allowed for the possibility that people could change, or at least try to. Meanwhile, Daniel remained conspicuously absent. Ava heard rumors through mutual acquaintances that he was seeing someone new and bragging about how he'd finally shaken off the dead weight. The news cut deep, but it also fueled Ava's resolve. She told herself that Daniel was history, and if he ever tried to worm his way back into her life, he'd find a very different woman waiting. Amid these chaotic emotions, Ava took a crucial step forward. She decided to become more involved with the Mackenzie businesses, at least on a trial basis. William arranged for a quiet meeting with a few board members of Mackenzie Global Holdings. Ava wanted to understand what her future child would inherit one day, how the company worked, and what philanthropic possibilities existed within its structure. The meeting was tense at first, with older board members eyeing her curiously, some whispering about her pregnancy. But William introduced her formally as his daughter, making it clear she would have a voice in decisions, especially concerning philanthropic ventures. She earned some cautious respect by asking pointed questions about corporate responsibility, charitable allocations, and employee benefits. At the end of the meeting, a senior board member, James Caldwell, approached her. "You speak with the same conviction your mother had," he said softly. "We all admired her. She was the heart of this company's moral compass, you know. We're glad to see you here." Ava felt her eyes well up. "Thank you," she managed. "I only hope I can live up to her legacy." She left that day feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Her baby would have a stable, secure future, and Ava would ensure Mackenzie Global Holdings used some of its vast resources for good. She was determined to champion causes her mother would have loved: education, housing for the underprivileged, and healthcare access. In the quiet corners of her penthouse, however, Ava still wrestled with her heartbreak over Daniel. She thought of how he had sneered at her, how he had physically shoved her out into the storm. Every day she grew stronger, but the wound he left in her heart refused to fully heal. Perhaps it never would. She tried to focus on the here and now, reminding herself that her life had taken a turn for the better. Surrounded by wealth, family connections, even if complicated, and a bright future for her baby, she had more blessings than she could count. Yet a lingering question simmered. Would Daniel ever come looking for her? If he did, would he come for her heart, or for her newfound wealth? That thought haunted her dreams at night, replaying the moment he threw her out. She vowed that if he ever returned, she wouldn't be the same naive woman he once knew. A storm was brewing on the horizon. Ava could sense it, and this time she was determined to meet it head-on, armed with the knowledge, resources, and iron will she had gained. The next chapters of her life would not be a tragedy, but a tale of empowerment, redemption, and possibly revenge. Weeks turned into months, and the day finally arrived. Ava went into labor late on a snowy Chicago evening, her penthouse windows frosted with delicate ice crystals. She had just finished finalizing some details for the Mother's Resource Center she was planning to launch when a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. The contractions started, a powerful reminder that her life was about to change forever. William Mackenzie had insisted on hiring a private car and security detail to ensure Ava reached the hospital safely. Emily Clark, who had become her unofficial doula, rushed to her side. Gerald Parker was also present, ensuring all hospital paperwork was in order. For a moment, Ava felt a pang of sadness that she didn't have a loving husband to guide her through, but she quickly brushed the thought aside. She would not let Daniel's absence tarnish this miracle. As the ambulance of sorts, more of a luxury SUV with medical gear, sped through the quiet streets toward a top-tier maternity hospital, Ava focused on her breathing. Fear and excitement mingled, tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. She had never felt more vulnerable or more powerful. She was bringing a new life into the world. The delivery was arduous. Ava labored for nearly 12 hours. Her father paced in the hallway, refusing to leave despite the staff's repeated attempts to usher him away. Emily stayed by Ava's bedside, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, brushing sweaty strands of hair from Ava's face. Gerald hovered, ensuring the hospital staff observed Ava's privacy. At last, with a final, excruciating push, a piercing cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. Ava's head fell back against the pillow, tears streaming. She heard the faint wail as her son was placed in her arms. His tiny, scrunched face was red from the effort of his first breaths, and he weighed a mere 6 pounds, 7 ounces, small but perfect. At that moment, the world fell away, and all that mattered was her baby in her arms. The love she felt was like nothing she'd experienced before. She kissed his forehead, letting her tears of joy drip onto his soft cheek. Outside, the sun had begun to rise, painting the Chicago skyline with gold and pink hues. The next few hours were a blur of nurses, doctors, and administrative tasks. William tentatively came to see his grandson, a rare softness in his eyes. "He's beautiful," he murmured, reaching out a gentle hand to stroke the baby's tiny head. Ava managed a smile, her face still flushed and exhausted. "He needs a name," she said, her voice raspy with fatigue. She had thought about naming him after her mother, or perhaps giving him a name that represented new beginnings. Emily suggested, "What about James, after your mother's longtime friend, James Caldwell?" Ava considered it and shook her head softly. "James is lovely," but not quite right. Gerald offered. Your mother always loved the name Theodore. She said it meant gift of God. Ava's eyes lit up with recognition. She remembered that. Theodore, Teddy, she whispered, looking down at the baby. Yes, Theodore Donovan Mackenzie. William seemed pleased enough with the compromise, though the Donovan surname carried Daniel's legacy. Ava explained her decision. Donovan was part of me when Teddy was conceived. I want my son to know where he came from, both sides of the family. It was a bittersweet choice, but Ava felt it was right. She wouldn't erase her past, painful as it was. Teddy was an emblem of hope, born out of heartbreak. For the first week, Ava stayed in the hospital's private suite, bonding with her newborn. Media outlets buzzed with speculation about William Mackenzie's new heir, but strict security measures kept them at bay. Ava refused all interview requests, intent on protecting her son's privacy. Finally, the day came when she could take Teddy home. She wrapped him in a soft cream-colored blanket and carried him into the penthouse, which had been outfitted with every baby gadget imaginable. Nurses and a night nanny were on standby, courtesy of William Mackenzie's concern and generosity. Ava felt both grateful and suffocated. She appreciated the help, but missed the simplicity of her old life, before money and media scrutiny overshadowed everything. Late one evening, as Teddy slept in his bassinet and the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, Ava heard the penthouse intercom buzz. She frowned, checking the time. Nearly 11 p.m. Who would be visiting now? She pressed the button. Yes? Miss Donovan, there's a gentleman downstairs insisting he knows you. His name is Daniel Donovan. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. Daniel. After months of silence, he had finally appeared. Her mind whirled with scenarios. Was he there to reconcile? To beg forgiveness? Or had he heard rumors of her wealth and the baby? She took a steadying breath. Send him away, she said, her voice cold. Part of her wanted to face him, to let him see the life she had built without him. But another part of her feared an ugly confrontation. Teddy was sleeping peacefully, and she didn't want drama under her roof. The security officer hesitated. He's making a scene, Mrs. Donovan. Says he won't leave until he speaks to you. Ava closed her eyes, recalling the night Daniel threw her out. She felt anger surge, but also a sense of finality. She was no longer the same frightened woman. Fine, she said. Send him to the lobby-level lounge. I'll come down. Adrenaline coursed through her as she instructed the nanny to watch Teddy. She threw on a sleek coat, navy wool with a fur-trimmed collar, and stepped into the private elevator. On the ride down, she practiced her composure, reminding herself that she was in control. If Daniel tried anything, security was on standby. Stepping into the plush lounge, she spotted him immediately. He was pacing near the marble fireplace, wearing a creased suit and looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Gone was the arrogant swagger. His hair was overgrown, eyes shadowed with fatigue. At the sight of Ava, he halted, eyes wide. Ava, he breathed. You look different. She approached, her heels clicking on the polished floor. What do you want, Daniel? He ran a hand through his hair. Can we talk somewhere private? She crossed her arms, steel in her gaze. This is private enough. Say what you came to say. His eyes flicked around at the luxurious surroundings. The doorman discreetly hovered at a distance, and a security camera blinked in the corner. Look, I've been hearing things, okay? I heard you came into some money. I also heard you had the baby. The bluntness of his words stung, but Ava didn't waver. Yes, I had the baby. A boy. Not that you bothered to inquire or show up until now. He winced. Ava, I messed up. I was in a bad place. Work was stressful, I was under pressure, and I acted like a jerk. I want to make it right. She arched an eyebrow. Why now? You threw me out in a storm when I was 6 months pregnant. I begged you to stay calm and talk, but you shoved me out. You called me worthless, and you expect me to believe you've suddenly changed? He looked genuinely contrite, but his eyes kept darting around the opulent lounge. Things were chaotic back then, but now I see how wrong I was. I'm ready to be a father to our child. Ava's heart pounded with anger. You don't even know your son's name. He hesitated. No, you're right, but that's why I'm here. I want to try. There was a time when those words would have melted her, but now she saw right through him. She remembered the nights he came home drunk, how he jeered at her growing belly, how he belittled her in front of friends. Could someone like that truly change? Or was he drawn by rumors of her connections, her penthouse, the Mackenzie fortune? It's too late, Daniel, she said softly but firmly. You abandoned me and your child. We don't need you anymore. He looked desperate. Please, Ava, let me see my son. Just once. I have a right. At this, she narrowed her eyes. Don't speak to me about rights. You forfeited any right when you threw me out. If you want to pursue this legally, be my guest. You'll quickly find out that my resources are far more extensive than you imagined. Daniel's face paled. He took a step back. What are you saying? Ava moved closer, her voice quiet but lethal. I'm saying you have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm a Mackenzie. My child is a Mackenzie heir. If you try anything, I will bury you in legal battles and restraining orders. You won't get near us. He swallowed, seemingly caught off guard. His bravado wavered. I just thought we could talk this through, find a way to be a family again. Ava almost laughed. Family. She recalled the bruises on her soul, the tears, the nights of terror. Daniel, you're too late. I have a family now. My son, my friend Emily, my father, and the legacy I'm building. You have no place in it. The doorman cleared his throat from a distance, sensing the tension. Daniel glanced at him nervously, then back at Ava. I won't give up, he muttered. Ava stared him down, unwavering. This conversation is over. If you have something more to say it through my lawyer. She turned and walked away, ignoring his pleas. As she headed back to the elevator, she felt shaky but victorious. Anger pulsed in her veins, mixed with relief. She had faced him at last. She had confronted the ghost of her past and emerged stronger. When she returned to the penthouse, Teddy was still asleep in his bassinet. Ava leaned over, gently stroking the soft fuzz on his head. A tear escaped her eye, but it wasn't sadness this time. It was sheer determination. She would protect her son at all costs, and Daniel Donovan would never hurt them again. Little did she know that Daniel's desperation would soon push him to more drastic measures, ones that would threaten everything she held dear. In the weeks following Daniel's unexpected visit, Ava threw herself into motherhood and her philanthropic project. The Mother's Resource Center, named the Margaret Mackenzie Memorial Center, was set to open in a renovated townhouse in a family-friendly neighborhood. With Emily Clark's help, Ava organized everything from parenting classes to childcare support, aligning with local hospitals for referrals. It was a cause close to her heart, given her own tumultuous journey to motherhood. Her father, William, remained a constant yet formal presence. He respected her boundaries while offering unwavering support, financial and otherwise. He even attended the Resource Center's inauguration, cutting the ceremonial ribbon alongside Ava and Emily. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for local news. William gave a short speech, praising Ava's commitment to charitable work. The word proud left his lips, surprising Ava. For a fleeting moment, she felt a genuine father-daughter bond, something she'd yearned for her entire life. Yet, in the back of her mind, she worried about Daniel. Her refusal to let him see Teddy had clearly unsettled him. A few times, she caught sight of someone lingering near the penthouse lobby, only to disappear when she looked twice. There were also calls from unknown numbers, followed by silence. She suspected Daniel was behind it, waiting for a chance to corner her again. Inside the ballroom, she mingled with CEOs, philanthropists, and public officials, gracefully fielding questions about the Resource Center and her future plans. A live orchestra played softly, and servers passed champagne flutes on silver trays. It was a world she had shunned for years, but tonight it felt like the perfect stage to showcase her transformation. About an hour into the event, Ava noticed a commotion near the entrance. She spotted Daniel weaving through the crowd with desperation etched on his face. Clearly he'd managed to sneak in, no doubt wanting to stir up trouble or confront her publicly. Security began to close in, but Ava held up a hand. She wanted this confrontation, right here, right now. Their eyes met across the opulent ballroom. Ava stood tall, regal even, while Daniel looked out of place in a wrinkled suit jacket. Murmurs spread as guests recognized the tension. Phones were raised, discreetly recording. Cameras flashed. "So, this is it," Daniel spat, stepping closer until they were only a few feet apart. "Your big revenge plan? Humiliate me in front of half of Chicago?" Ava's lips curved into a calm, controlled smile. "No, Daniel," she said, her voice carrying through the hushed space. "I'm simply living my life. You're the one who came here uninvited." He let out a hollow laugh. "Living your life, huh? Surrounded by money and power, stuff you kept secret from me." "You never deserved to know," she replied coldly. "I wanted a simple life, a genuine marriage. I hid my wealth so you would love me for me, but I guess that wasn't enough for you." Daniel's face flushed red. Cameras clicked, capturing every word. "You're unbelievable." Without warning, Ava gestured toward the crowd, her voice ringing clear. "This man," she declared, "threw me out onto the street when I was 6 months pregnant. He called me worthless. Now, seeing me here tonight, he expects sympathy." A collective gasp swept the ballroom. The scandal was thick in the air. William watched with a stoic expression, while Emily clutched her phone, recording the encounter for posterity. Daniel's eyes darted around, realizing how badly this was going for him. "You're twisting the story," he muttered. I was under a lot of stress." Ava took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "You made your choice. Now I've made mine, and I choose to protect my son from a man who discarded him before he was even born." She turned away, snapping her fingers at security. They stepped forward, escorting Daniel away, his protests echoing across the polished floors. The media cameras followed him out, capturing his ignominious retreat. Ava felt her heart pounding, but she maintained her composure for the rest of the night. She had shown the world, and Daniel, that she was no longer the frightened, penniless wife. By the time the gala ended, social media was awash with videos and photos of the confrontation. Headlines blared, "Mackenzie heiress faces estranged husband in spectacular showdown." Public opinion seemed firmly on Ava's side. Sympathy poured in from supporters of her mother's resource center. Even skeptics, who initially questioned her philanthropic motives, admired her courage in exposing Daniel's cruelty. But for all the satisfaction that came from that public takedown, Ava still felt a pang of sadness deep inside. Revenge might be satisfying, but it didn't erase the hurt Daniel caused. That night, she returned to the penthouse, fed Teddy his bedtime bottle, and rocked him to sleep. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "You'll never know that kind of pain, my love. I promise." In the days that followed, Daniel disappeared from the public eye. Rumor had it he lost his job, fired after his meltdown at the gala made headlines. Gossip columns reported that the new woman he'd been seeing left him, not wanting to be associated with a disgraced man. Ava should have felt triumphant, but instead she felt only emptiness. Maybe that's the final twist of revenge, she mused. It leaves you feeling hollow. However, life moved on. Teddy cooed and babbled, filling her days with laughter. The resource center thrived, helping dozens of mothers in need. William Mackenzie and Ava grew closer, slowly mending the years of estrangement. And as her philanthropic work garnered more attention, Ava started receiving invites to speak at conferences and charity events. By the time the hearing date arrived, the story had once again made local headlines. Mackenzie heiress versus Estranged husband in custody showdown. Paparazzi swarmed outside the courthouse, snapping photos of Ava as she stepped out of a black SUV, wearing a neatly tailored suit and carrying herself with calm determination. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Daniel was already seated at the defendant's table, looking haggard and out of place. His lawyer, a weary public defender, fumbled with paperwork. Across the aisle, Ava sat with her legal team, Gerald Parker, and a few discreet security personnel. The judge entered, calling the court to order. Testimonies were given. Ava's lawyers presented evidence of Daniel's neglect, the texts he sent, and the night he threw her out. They had statements from neighbors who witnessed her leaving the apartment in tears during that stormy night. The resource center caretaker testified that Daniel had tried to tarnish the organization's reputation with false rumors. Daniel's defense largely revolved around claims that he was under emotional duress and made mistakes, but wanted a chance to be a father. He insisted that Teddy deserved to know him, that a child needs both parents, and that it was cruel for Ava to keep him away. He also tried to paint Ava as controlling, accusing her of using her wealth to shut him out. The judge listened patiently, weighing each side. In the end, the decision was clear. Given Daniel's documented behavior and lack of stable employment, combined with the child's young age, the judge refused to grant unsupervised visitation. Instead, Daniel was offered a heavily supervised arrangement if he could prove genuine effort to rehabilitate himself, including therapy and consistent financial support for Teddy's well-being. Ava left the courthouse feeling victorious, though her heart still pounded from the stress of the confrontation. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. She simply held her head high, cradling Teddy in her arms. If Daniel wanted to see Teddy, he would have to jump through every legal hoop, and Ava doubted he had the fortitude to do so. Time would tell. Back at the penthouse, William Mackenzie greeted her with a rare fatherly hug. "Well done, Ava," he said simply. She sank into his embrace, realizing just how far she'd come, from a frightened pregnant woman on a stormy night to a triumphant mother securing her son's future. Later, after putting Teddy down for his nap, Ava found herself staring out at the Chicago skyline. She remembered the younger version of herself, anxious, uncertain, desperate for love. She never could have imagined she'd stand here today, forging alliances, running a successful charitable organization, and shaping policies at Mackenzie Global Holdings. Life had taken her through heartbreak to a place of newfound strength. Emily stopped by that evening to celebrate the legal victory with a quiet dinner. They clinked glasses of sparkling cider and toasted to new beginnings. "A toast," Emily announced, "to Ava Donovan Mackenzie, the fiercest mom in the Windy City." Ava laughed, feeling warmth spread in her chest. "I'll take that title happily." In the weeks that followed, Daniel failed to schedule any supervised visits. Word reached Ava that he had left Chicago, possibly to start afresh in another city. Perhaps he had finally accepted defeat, or maybe he was cooking up another scheme. But for now, Ava had peace. She was free to dedicate her energy to the people who mattered. Teddy, her father, her philanthropic mission, and her newfound circle of trusted friends. Her relationship with William continued to evolve. Though the past couldn't be erased, they bonded over the joy of seeing Teddy learn to crawl and babble. William even joined Ava on occasional visits to the resource center, donating supplies and discreetly mentoring young fathers who showed genuine interest in caring for their children. Ava saw in him a willingness to change, a trait she once thought impossible. Meanwhile, the Mackenzie board meetings became more inclusive of Ava's ideas, especially regarding healthcare benefits for employees and partnerships with social enterprises. James Caldwell, the board member who remembered her mother fondly, became a close ally. Under their combined influence, Mackenzie Global Holdings began allocating funds to initiatives that would benefit underserved communities, a sharp departure from the purely profit-driven approach of the past. Despite these positive changes, Ava never forgot the lessons her struggles taught her. She remained humble, refusing to let wealth define her self-worth. She donated generously, but also ensured her mother's philanthropic legacy would continue beyond fleeting media attention. She wanted sustainable change, not empty gestures. One crisp autumn morning, she held Teddy's tiny hand as they stepped onto the playground at the resource center. Children laughed and played on the brightly colored slides. Mothers chatted, some cradling newborns. A sense of community thrived here, fueled by empathy and support. Ava spotted a teenage mother nervously pushing a stroller, uncertain of how to fit in. Ava approached, introduced herself, and guided her to a group of welcoming moms. Moments like this reminded Ava why she'd fought so hard, for her son, for herself, for every woman who'd been cast aside or overlooked. As Teddy toddled around, letting out squeals of delight, Ava felt tears prick her eyes. She thought of Daniel only briefly, wondering if he ever regretted throwing away the blessings he could have shared. But ultimately, she knew her life was better without his toxicity. She had a future to build, a future shining with possibility, guided by the resilience she found within herself and the unconditional love she had for her child. Looking down at Teddy, she whispered, "We made it, baby boy. We really did." In that quiet moment, with leaves rustling in the wind and the laughter of children echoing through the air, she knew her story had shifted from tragedy to triumph. Ava Donovan Mackenzie, once a frightened, pregnant woman, had become the author of her destiny, and no one, not even the man who tried to break her, could take that away. Ava's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, resilience and love can guide us toward a brighter path. She began as a humble wife, blindsided by her husband's betrayal. Yet, through perseverance and the unexpected inheritance of a billionaire's legacy, she discovered her own power and transformed her life. The mother she became, shielding her son from harm while opening her heart to help others, is a testament to the strength we all hold within. If Ava's journey has inspired you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this video. By spreading this story, you help shine a light on the transformative power of hope, tenacity, and compassion. Together, we can remind everyone that no challenge is insurmountable, and even in the face of heartbreak, a new beginning awaits. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more real-life romantic dramas that prove hope always finds a way.